The officer slammed the hood of the car shut and tightened the cuffs until Paul gasped. "You're under arrest," the officer said. "Loan fraud and intentional default." "What are you talking about?" Paul shouted as customers spilled out of the shop he had built with his own hands. "I've been paying. Every month." "Tell it to the judge." The metal bit into his wrists as he was shoved into the back seat. His phone rang in his pocket. He already knew the name on the screen. Mark. The car pulled away before he could answer. 3 months earlier, Paul had stood in the same shop, sweating and smiling as customers crowded around his counter. He had opened the business with shaking hands and borrowed faith, telling himself this was the start of everything. That faith had come from one person. Mark. When the bank rejected him, Paul had sat on his bed staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks like they might give him answers. "No collateral," the banker had said. "No guarantor." At home, his mother watched him quietly. "Maybe this isn't the time." "It has to be," Paul replied. "If I don't do this now, I never will." He called Mark that night. "Mark, I need help," he said without pride. "Just a guarantor. I'll do the rest." Mark didn't hesitate. "Of course. That's what friends are for." The relief nearly made Paul cry. At the private lender's office, Mark arrived before him, confident, relaxed. "I'll handle the paperwork," Mark told the lender. "He's new to this." Paul smiled, grateful. He didn't read the documents closely. He trusted the man who had shared his childhood, his secrets, his dreams. The money came fast. The business grew faster. Every month, Paul counted cash and handed it to Mark. "Paid already," Mark would say. "You're doing great. Keep going." Paul believed him. Until the arrest. At the station, Paul sat on a cold bench while officers whispered nearby. "You defaulted 3 months straight," one said. The lender filed charges. "That's impossible," Paul repeated. "My guarantor made the payments." The officer slid a paper toward him. According to this, payments were never received. Paul's hands shook. He dialed Mark again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. By the time he was released on bail, the damage was done. The landlord locked the shop. Suppliers stopped answering his calls. Neighbors avoided him. At home, his mother sat silently, staring at the wall. "I trusted him," Paul said, voice breaking. She didn't reply. Days passed. Then weeks. Paul tried to rebuild. He went to the lender himself. "You paid into a different account," the lender said. "Not ours." "What account?" Paul asked. The lender shrugged. "Ask your guarantor." That night, Mark finally called. "Paul, calm down," Mark said smoothly. "There must be a mix-up." "A mix-up?" Paul shouted. "I lost everything." "I'm trying to fix it," Mark replied. "Give me time." Time never came. Instead, Paul received a court summons. Fraud. Intent to deceive. Criminal default. He stood alone in the courtroom as whispers filled the air. When Mark finally appeared, he looked calm, almost bored. "This is a misunderstanding," Mark told the judge. "I warned him about the payments. He ignored me." Paul turned to him, stunned. "You're lying." Mark didn't look at him. The judge adjourned the case. Outside, Paul grabbed Mark's arm. "Why are you doing this?" Mark leaned closer, voice low. "Because you trusted me." That night, Paul broke down. Everything he had worked for was gone. His name was ruined. His future felt sealed. But despair has a strange way of sharpening the mind. One evening, while cleaning his phone, Paul found an old voice note he had sent to Mark months earlier. "I'm sending the money now," Paul's voice said in the recording. "Please make the payment today." He froze. Then he remembered something else. The camera above his shop. The one Mark insisted on installing himself. For the first time in weeks, Paul felt something stir inside him. Hope. Not relief. Determination. He stood up, wiped his face, and whispered to himself, "You forgot one thing, Mark." Paul didn't sleep that night. He kept replaying the voice note again and again, listening to his own voice, steady and clear, saying the words that now felt like evidence. At dawn, he stood up and made a decision. If Mark had destroyed his life with paperwork, then paperwork, and proof, would be the thing that saved it. The first stop was the shop. The landlord watched him unlock the door reluctantly. "You have 1 hour," the man warned. "I don't want trouble. I just need something I left behind," Paul replied. Inside, dust had already begun to settle. The shelves were half empty. The silence hurt more than the arrest. Paul went straight to the back where the small security monitor used to sit. The screen was gone. His heart dropped. He rushed outside. "Where's the camera system?" he asked the landlord. The man scratched his head. "Your friend took it. Said it was his." Paul's jaw tightened. Of course he did. Still, Paul didn't panic. Mark had always been confident. Too confident. The kind of man who believed he had covered every angle. He hadn't. Paul went to the small electronics store down the street where he had originally bought the camera. The owner squinted at him. "You again? Your friend came here last week. What did he want?" Paul asked quickly. "Replacement hard drive. Said the old one was faulty." Paul felt his pulse quicken. "Did you keep the old one?" The man smiled. "Policy. We never throw things away immediately." 10 minutes later, Paul was holding the hard drive with trembling hands. It wasn't complete, but it was enough. At home, he borrowed a neighbor's laptop and played the footage. There it was. Mark standing in the shop, counting cash. Mark on the phone. Mark sliding money into an envelope and leaving with it. The timestamps matched the days Paul had handed him repayment money. Paul covered his mouth, tears streaming down his face. Proof. Real proof. But he needed more. He went to the lender's office again. "This won't help you," the lender said coldly. "Your guarantor is solid. You're the criminal here." Paul leaned forward and placed the hard drive on the desk. "Check your records." The payments were rerouted. The lender hesitated. "Rerouted how?" "Shell account," Paul said. "Under my guarantor's control." The lender's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation." "So is fraud," Paul replied quietly. 2 days later, the lender called him back. "You might want to come in," the man said. "With a lawyer." At the meeting, the truth started to unravel. The payments had been redirected into an account opened under a business name Mark had created months earlier. The signatures matched. The access logs pointed to one person. "Mark. This changes things," the lender muttered. The court date was moved forward. When Paul walked into the courtroom this time, he wasn't alone. His lawyer sat beside him, calm and prepared. Mark entered late, still confident, still smirking. The judge listened as the evidence was presented. The voice note played through the speakers. "I'm sending the money now. Please make the payment today." Mark shifted in his seat. Then the CCTV footage played. The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward. "Is that you, Mr. Mark?" Mark swallowed. I don't know what that proves." "It proves you received the funds," the lawyer said. "And never paid the lender." Mark stood up abruptly. "He's framing me." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down." By the end of the session, the air had changed. Mark's lawyer requested a recess. Outside, Mark grabbed Paul's arm. "You think you've won?" Mark hissed. "I did this because you were always the lucky one. Always the good son. I deserved more." Paul looked at him calm. "You could have asked. Instead, you stole." Mark laughed nervously. "No one will believe you." But they already had. The verdict came a week later. Fraud. Misappropriation. False testimony. Mark collapsed into his chair as the sentence was read. As officers led him away, he turned back, eyes wild. "Please," he whispered. "We're brothers." Paul said nothing. Justice didn't feel sweet. It felt heavy. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Microphones flashed. Paul, how does it feel to be cleared? Someone asked. He took a breath. Truth takes time, but it always arrives. That night, Paul sat with his mother again. You did well, she said softly. He nodded. I lost a friend. She squeezed his hand. You found yourself. From a prison cell, Mark wrote a letter. I'm sorry, it said. I forgot one thing. You were stronger than I thought. Paul folded the letter and set it aside. Some apologies come too late. If this part of the story moved you, hit the like button right now. It helps more people hear stories that matter. Paul didn't visit Mark in prison immediately. Not because he didn't think about it, but because every time the thought crossed his mind, his chest tightened with memories he wasn't ready to reopen. Instead, he focused on surviving. Clearing his name didn't magically restore what he had lost. The shop was gone. The customers were gone. The whispers followed him everywhere. When he walked through the market, people stared, some curious, some embarrassed, some still suspicious. Truth traveled slower than scandal. One afternoon, an old supplier approached him. I heard what really happened, the man said carefully. If you're starting again, I can help. Paul nodded, emotion catching in his throat. Thank you. It was small, but it was something. Weeks later, Paul sat in a rented room with a notebook, sketching plans again. Smaller this time. Safer. He had learned the hard way that trust without verification was a luxury he could no longer afford. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Paul, a familiar voice said weakly. Mark. Paul closed his eyes. Why are you calling me? They allowed one call, Mark said quickly. Please. I just need to talk to you. Silence stretched between them. I didn't come to insult you, Mark continued. I came to say, I was wrong. Paul laughed once, bitterly. You destroyed my life. I know, Mark whispered. Every day in here reminds me. Paul wanted to hang up. He wanted to scream. Instead, he asked the one question that had haunted him for months. Why? Mark exhaled shakily. Because I was tired of being invisible. You were always the one everyone believed in. Your mother, your teachers, even my parents compared me to you. That's not my fault, Paul said. I know that now, Mark replied. But back then, jealousy sounded like reason. Paul said nothing. I don't expect forgiveness, Mark continued. I just needed you to know. I regret everything. The call ended. Paul sat there long after the screen went dark. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a process. And he wasn't there yet. Months passed. Slowly, Paul rebuilt. A smaller business. Different partners. Clear contracts. No shortcuts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. One evening, as he closed for the day, a young man approached him nervously. Sir, the man said, I heard your story. Paul looked up. Which version? The real one, the man replied. I'm about to take a loan. They asked for a guarantor. I wanted to ask, what should I do? Paul studied him for a long moment. Choose carefully, he said finally. And don't hand your future to anyone completely. Even people you love. The man nodded, grateful. That night, Paul sat with his mother, sharing a quiet meal. You've changed, she said. I had to, he replied. She smiled softly. Pain teaches lessons comfort never will. A year later, Paul received another letter from prison. This one was shorter. I'm taking responsibility now. Not just legally, personally. I don't ask for forgiveness anymore. I'm trying to earn it. Paul folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Some doors don't reopen. Some wounds become scars. And scars, he had learned, were proof that you survived. On the anniversary of his arrest, Paul stood outside his new shop, smaller than the old one but built entirely on his own terms. A passerby stopped and said, You're the man who was betrayed by his friend, right? Paul nodded. The man shook his head. You're strong. Paul smiled faintly. I didn't have a choice. As the sun dipped low, Paul locked up and took a deep breath. Betrayal had taken almost everything from him. But it hadn't taken his integrity. It hadn't taken his resilience. And it hadn't taken his future. If you stayed till the end of this story, please hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more people who need stories like this. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. And if you want more powerful stories about trust, loss, justice, and redemption, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes, the people who break us are the ones who teach us how strong we really are.